Hey everybody, Paul Chin Jr. here, host of the Talking Serverless podcast. It's a podcast where we talk about serverless and all the folks that are in the cloud community doing wonderful things on all the clouds, in particular AWS. This podcast is sponsored by Serverless Guru. We are your number one resource for all things in the cloud. So if you have an idea or something you want to do it with serverless, give Serverless Guru a shout. I'm really excited today because I was able to bring on a special guest. AWS is actually pretty good about building their communities and supporting different people. We have heroes and community builders. And now I want to introduce you to Rejoice Mucheri. She is one of the new voices from AWS, and I'm super thrilled to have her on the show today. Rejoice, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for having me. Hi, everybody at Serverless Guru. You guys rock. Right. Yeah, it's good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Why don't you kind of take a few minutes and tell us what you're working on now and, what's it like to be a new voice for AWS?
Oh, wow. I like that. Feel like I'm in the hot seat. But yeah, maybe I'll just start with a bit of a background about myself. My name is Rejoice Cherry, as Paul Chin has already introduced. I'm actually a serverless developer. I'm a technical curriculum developer. That's just a fancy way to say I build workshops that just help people learn serverless, especially on AWS, and that I cannot say my story without giving credit to the man that gave me a chance to do that, and that's Rocius. He's an AWS serverless hero himself, and he is the one who brought me in under his wing, making me proudly say now I'm a serverless developer and technical curriculum, developer as well. I'm an AAI, that is an AWS authorized instructor. So I think you can kind of say I really enjoy teaching and training, especially when it comes to AWS and the cloud in general. And I'm a community builder. I think you can tell by the shirt. I'm also a community builder under serverless. So yeah, that's my background basically. So in terms of what I'm working on, as I said, I do work close hand in hand with Rocius. I believe he used to work for you guys as well. So he's an amazing person, and one thing that he does at EduCloud Academy is build workshops, hands-on workshops to be exact, that actually simulate real-world scenarios. A lot of times when we look at all these workshops that are out there, they actually don't depict real world. It's like launch an EC2 instance, but what are you going to do with it after you launch it? Host a static website, but what are the chances that you actually get employed and they say, come and host static websites for us? So he gives a different meaning to learning on his site, EduCloud, by allowing you to learn by doing real applications, like you build real applications that depict what the industries are looking for and get to use all the serverless technologies. So yeah, we are basically working on that. We are currently upgrading most, if not all, of our workshops to include a bit of generative AI. So it kind of keeps us on our toes. We always have to think, okay, how are we gonna implement this? How are we gonna do that? But yeah, that's quite fun and it's exciting. It's always exciting working with Roches, yeah.
Yeah, to be able to teach and to show what you've learned, that really does, they always say if you're able to teach, then you finally actually know it, right? Like if you're just doing it or just following tutorials, you're not really understanding it. Then, like you said, you go out and you do something for real, and then you actually start to get it more. But if you really want to understand it, try to teach it to somebody else to explain what it is
Exactly.
that you've done to someone else. Rejoice, remind me again, like where in the world you are.
I am in the continent of Africa, Right at the bottom, I'm in South Africa. I'm originally from Zimbabwe. I'm actually a Zimbabwean citizen and national, but I have lived in South Africa for probably 14 years now. So I stay in the capital of South Africa, which is Pretoria. And yeah, it's such a nice, quiet city. Everything is chill here, everything is cool.
That's beautiful. So, being in South Africa, how did you like get into cloud? Like that wasn't your first job or career choice, right? Like you didn't go to school for software engineering or anything like that, right?
No, I did not.
So tell me, how did you get to cloud? Like we know Rose involved, Rosius, and we know you've become like a resource to teach others, and you're certified by AWS to teach. But like, how did you get there?
Oh, okay. That's quite an interesting story, actually.
Well, that's good. We love interesting stories on this show.
I am coming from a sales and operations background. So I got to a place where, when you get to that place when your career has sort of hit a ceiling,
Mhm.
I think I could tell something was missing, but it had to take the pandemic in 2020 and all the lockdowns for me to be like, okay, something really has to change. And at that time, I remember the way I've always been intrigued by tech. I'm that kind of kid who grew up trying to get my mom to buy me a little electronics. I didn't know then they were called Raspberry Pis, but I've always been that kind of kid who enjoy video games. I want to know how do they make them, how do they do that. So I've always had a bit of tech acumenship somewhere within me. But being in sales and then lockdown hit and we couldn't actually, and you can imagine I was selling physical products, right? And all of a sudden you can't talk to the manufacturers, you can't talk to the producers of your stuff, and everything is locked down. And as much as you have things electronically, you are thinking, how can I make this better? So I was now in a space that was a very traditional kind of setup. It was a non-profit, and a lot of things were not moving as fast as I would have wanted them to, from the ideas that I had. So it sort of became kind of a roadblock for me in a way. And I kept thinking, I want to do things differently. So one day I was talking to a cousin of mine. He is a Microsoft certified trainer, and he was teaching all these people about Azure. And I was like, so why you are smart? Why are you not learning this? And I was like, actually, why am I not? So the idea was for me to learn it, for me to actually find better ways to do my job, like take advantage of the cloud. So I got into the cloud via Azure, and I started to learn Azure fundamentals, like all the fundamentals. I think I even aced all the exams within 2 months. Oh, I think Azure has about six different fundamentals: AI, security, data, all of that. That's how enthusiastic I was about it. And the more I did it, the more I wanted to know. And then all of a sudden, me trying to do both, I felt like, no, this is not gonna cut it. I'm not really gonna go far. And there was still more resistance also from my current role, where it didn't seem like, okay, we were about to embrace what I was bringing in anytime soon. So one day I just woke up and then I thought hard about it. It was a weekend, and then on Monday, I remember, I'll never forget it. I think it was at 9:18 a.m. I sent a resignation later. I still remember my email. I sent my resignation letter, and I said effective immediately. I've resigned. Like I can't do this, and it was without warning, with nothing. And then everybody was thinking, why? What are you gonna do? Because you were holding this down. I was actually working as a director of sales and operations. I had about 9 different countries that were under me. That I was different sales personnel, probably a staff of close to 250 people, and I was like, nah. So I just up and quit. I up and quit, and a lot of things obviously were involved. It wasn't just cloud. I think cloud was the final push I needed to actually say, you can do more than this. So yeah, I quit my job and then I got into learning. Like I said, I'm going to learn full time. But at that time, because the family still has to eat, I still had investments on, I had a few businesses running. I couldn't exactly balance it still. And it became hard for me to crack because the Azure world, I'm sorry to say this for anybody listening who loves Azure, but the Azure community was not very accommodating, or rather, let me say it was, I didn't find the resources and assistance I needed within that space. So I couldn't really learn much. And I had to figure so many things out on my own. And I felt like this is so hard. Why did I even quit my job? And then I got introduced to the She Builds, AWS She Builds program that was for the cloud practitioner track and solutions architect. So I was like, okay, let me just give this one more shot. I got into She Builds. I got there in, I think now it's She Clouds now. I got in there, did the cloud practitioner track, and there was this huge support in the community. I was like, wait a minute, this is learning, this is what I need. There were all these people from AWS, there were all these mentors, women and people were also breaking into tech, people were being engineers for years. There were these Slack channels, there were these Discord channels, there were everybody was just trying to help everybody. And I was like, this is not so difficult after all. So that really ignited back my passion. I was like, okay, I'm going to give this a shot and I'm going to do this with AWS. So I found myself writing my first AWS certification, wrote my cloud practitioner, I passed it, and hooray, that was great, which was also paid for by the She Builds program because at that time they were giving 100% vouchers. Now you can imagine I wasn't working, I didn't have money for exams, and the community is helping. And they brought on the second phase, which was for solutions architect, and they were also giving 100% vouchers. And I went in there again and I wrote that. And you wouldn't even believe, I'm a trainer now, but I actually failed it twice. I failed that exam twice. The first voucher I got it through the user group because I now joined a user group, AWS user group within here in Johannesburg, South Africa. And the first voucher I got it through there, and I wrote and I failed. And I was like, "Rrr." At that time, there was that pressure to say, oh, if you have solutions architect, you get a job. That was before I actually knew. I think we'll get there. I was driving it. I need to get certified. I need to get certified. So I went in and just studied theory and I went to write, and boom, the exam just hit me right in the face. I failed it dismally. I failed it. And then 2 weeks later, I was like, okay, I'm going again. At that time now, my cousin had a place where he was like, oh, they are looking for someone who is a solutions architect. And they asked me to recommend, and I said, you. Because he thought I had passed. I was like, oh. Now I couldn't tell him I had failed. So I'm like, I have 2 weeks. So I went back in and I failed again. Oh God, that was an interesting time. Then I decided to just take a beat. I had enough guidance from people from the She Builds campaign. They were like, okay, you're gonna take your time, you're gonna do these labs, you're gonna use Skill Builder, and when you start doing practice exam questions and you get to 80%, then request a voucher, then we're gonna give you a voucher. So I now took my time to actually learn to understand. And I realized there is actually no shortcuts. I need to learn and understand what I'm learning. And I think it was maybe 2 months later, after all of that, that I decided, okay, now I'm ready to write. At that time, that's the time I fell in love now with teaching. Because during that time, I had an opportunity to train a restart program with one company that needed some people to help. And the more I was training these people with Restart, which is cloud practitioner and some hands-on, the more I understood and got me ready to write my exam. And I realized during that time that most people fail the hands-on stuff because it wasn't really clear. You're trying to do hands-on, and most of the people who build these workshops are building workshop from a position of understanding. They've been in the industry. So if you're going to tell someone, okay, now make sure you put the JSON payload here for testing, I don't even know what a JSON payload is. So that was my cue. I was like, I wish there were workshops that didn't assume I knew the jargon. It didn't assume I just understood what those things mean, because most of us are coming from non-technical backgrounds and we don't know these things. And you are assuming because I'm learning tech, I know, but I actually don't. So a lot of times I found it hard to complete workshops because of the jargon. I just couldn't figure out what they were saying. Click next and make sure you test the API. I'm like, what the hell is an API? So it was that for me. And I think that's what now led me into pursuing starting a blog, and which later meeting Raw and starting to build these workshops. But that was basically the journey, in how I got into cloud. And the next thing, I just fell in love. I think AWS made me fall in love with it. I was ready to give up on it, and I was like, maybe this is not for me. But the AWS community and everything about the help, the support that they bring, it made me fall in love with the cloud all over again. And then here I am. Now I'm a community builder. I'm an authorized instructor. I'm certified. It's been great.
That's so wonderful, that the community that you found was there, and a big reason of why we do this podcast, why we write blogs. I mean, Serverless Guru is a commercial, entity. Like, we're out there to try to, do consulting and sell contracts and all of that. But we know deep down that if we don't foster folks that are coming into the industry, that there won't be an industry for us to sell to, right? Like, we have to understand that the work in cloud and all of this back end technology requires people. The generative AI stuff is not going to solve our immediate problem of having enough qualified engineers to even use the AI, right? Like, you have to know some things. And to your point, like, not everyone comes from an IT background, not everyone's going to have a computer science degree, but that doesn't mean we can't teach people that are new to it, right? Like, I've learned it. I wasn't in a technical thing. You learned it. You weren't in a technical thing. It just took the will of the community and folks like you to present these resources in a different way. So, I wanted to lean into that some more and ask you, what is the non-technical insight or the non-technical skills that you had built in previous, like, because you've been working, right? Like, you have skills and careers, like you mentioned, sales and sales organizations and kind of almost like managerial type stuff, right? How did those non-tech, non-JSON, non-coding skills, really help you to get where you are now?
For me, because of my background, I worked a lot with customers. My role was customer facing a lot. So I found that when I came into the cloud, what helped me the most was my understanding of customer needs. So that skill, being able to always talk to a client and understand what they are saying without them saying it, it was a skill that I had actually acquired from sales. Salespeople can be a little bit corny, and they tend to seem like they are, they are those people that are just going to lie, but not really. I would say that my role in sales and operations at large helped me be able to communicate above all, and actually be able to pull out of a client the things that he actually needs that he didn't realize that he needs. So when I got into cloud, it made me a better listener. I could actually sit back and talk to non technical decision makers from a technical perspective and be able to break things down further for them to understand, because I could relate from me coming from a non-technical role, and I'm thinking I was just trying to do a workshop and I didn't know what an API is. So if I'm going to talk to somebody who I need to make a decision about a solution I'm bringing, I need to make them understand it at their level. So it allowed me to place myself in their shoes, because I mean, I was coming from a customer facing roles. So I found that the more I embraced my previous experiences, the faster I actually grew in tech. Because when I first came in, imposter syndrome and all of that, I always tried to shy away from the fact that I'm from a non-technical role. And it caused a lot of roadblocks for me, because I'm trying to show up there and be like, okay, I'm a developer, but are you? You will get there. I can say that now, but at that time I wasn't. I had just learned enough cloud fundamentals, enough cloud architecture for me to be able to look at a situation and give you a possible solution, and probably not go as far as implementing it at production level. But I could understand the AWS ecosystem. So one thing that I did, which I built from my non-tech, is as someone in sales, I knew that every time we're bringing something new to the market, I had to research the market. I had to understand the customer needs. So I had to leverage on those things. And I did that with the AWS ecosystem. I needed to understand my product. You can't sell what you don't know. So I made myself, I was like, okay, Rejoice, you, from now onwards, you are the brand. AWS is the product. So if you are going to show up and say, look, buy me as your employee because I have this product, what can you tell people about AWS? So I made AWS my product the same way I used to do when I'm doing sales. I had to understand where it starts from. I had to understand how it works. I had to understand the services. I had to understand I had to know the pros, the cons. I had to understand how to implement things. I had to understand the trade-offs. Why AWS and not this? I had to understand why EC2 and not Lambda. I really had to treat AWS like just another product I'm trying to sell. And the more I got into it and understood it at that level, the easier it was for me to sell myself to an employer. Because now I wasn't competing with, oh, but I don't know enough coding. I now had to be, I don't know coding, but do I know my product? So, what is it about my product I can tell a possible client, you see? And from there, things were smooth. So to those people who are coming from non-technical background, it doesn't matter where you're coming from. I always like to give this example. I remember there's a time I had to take on we had like an event at one of the biggest stadiums in South Africa, in Johannesburg. It's called FNB Stadium. The stadium sits over 90,000 people sitting capacity. If you put people in the field, probably it will be like 120. And at that time, I was in charge of over 2,500 sales and marketing personnel. We were going around the stadium selling these different products. And I always like to refer to that to say the logistics of that, the handling of that, the handling of somebody swiped the wrong amount. They sent the wrong amount for a purchase, and then we have to handle those errors. We have to handle security of the cash being exchanged. I took that and I said, think of this as your AWS ecosystem. How did you handle that stadium? So if you're going to come in and you have to give a client a solution within an AWS ecosystem, and there are certain trade-offs you have to make to manage over 2,500 sales personnel, how did you assign who to what? You see that? How did you decide who stands where? How did you decide how stock should come in and come out? How did you do the little hubs? So it came down to all of that. And I was like, look, this is basically AWS. There's a place where I had with all the stock. I had to do mini hubs around the stadium. That's like our availability zones, our local zones. So how does AWS do this? And me leveraging on that knowledge and that experience that I had, which was completely non technical, I could easily translate it to understanding my product. And AWS was my product. So I needed to know everything in and out about how it works. And it has made my journey the smoothest. So I would say, know your product.
That's a wonderful analogy. That's a beautiful experience that you were it's very creative to be able to say, I manage this physical sales process. And from that, I can abstract and look at patterns to apply to managing digital infrastructure, because there is still a workload in progress, and there is still services like people and things that happen on a regular cadence, and they all have to be integrated properly, and then they have to be tracked and inspected and monitored and all of these things. And that is wonderful, because when people think about the cloud and how technical it is overwhelming, because there is a lot of new words you have to learn, like availability zones or APIs, like you said, or like what is a cache, and then computer scientists don't make it any easier, and they use words like we have heuristics.
Yeah.
And in your example, just knowing where to put the salespeople in the stadium is your heuristic, right? It's just a very good guess that we put into a system. And I think that is wonderful, because there is so much talent out in the world that can be, taught and brought in and improve our industry, because it's a new voice, right? Like, it's a different way to think about these problems. Um, and that is really something cool that I think you're bringing to it, and that's why you've been as successful as you have been, because of that different viewpoint, right? Being able to say, yes, this is a new problem, but there's enough similarities here where I can really thrive with this. And I think that's a great thing for our listeners to hear and to understand, that all of your experiences are relevant for, solving problems. You shouldn't discount it because it wasn't in tech or whatever, right? Like, it's still good work experience. It is still good communication. It is about that communication. And so from there, I wanted to bring up the fact that we had actually met briefly in Vegas for the AWS reInvent show. The stadium that you were working at had 100,000 people. AWS had 60,000 people, and you were there. Tell us about, you know, when you showed up at AWS, not only did you come, but like, you put in some work, right? Like, you did some peer talk and stuff. Tell me about that.
Oh wow, that was, oh my god, that was insane. I would say reinvent was like the highlight of my career. I'm not gonna lie, it was amazing. To begin with, it still comes back to the AWS community as a whole, because for me to even be there, it came from I received an All Builders grant from AWS. That's just basically AWS sponsors people that are in the first 5 years of their career, that have shown, a certain kind of interest in learning. They are sharing back with the community and all those things like that. So it's something you actually apply for, and they choose a certain number of people across the world from underrepresented communities, if we have to put it like that. So it's actually an all expenses paid trip, which is so grateful. Shout out to AWS All Builders Grant for that, for giving us that beautiful opportunity. So I got to reinvent via that grant. So I'm an ABW alumni. Hey, to all the alumni out there. So before I got there, The other opportunity that comes from being a community builder is there is always this call for papers that come in. You see, there's always the call for speakers that come in within their private community Slack channels. And one thing that I've observed is most of those things come up as a way to teach you and train you, and not train you in terms of training you how to speak, but like you said at the beginning, you when you teach, you learn. You see, you learn twice. So when the call came to say there has been AWS peer talks that were organized. Peer talks are basically what AWS does at reinvent. They are sessions where people come together. It's like peer-to-peer talking. Like we have a topic, and then we have people who sign up for that topic through the events app, and they sit in the session. We are going to talk. We are going to talk about those particular things that the topic is highlighting. But the beautiful thing about it is not scripted. So you're not sitting there with slides and then we are talking over you. It's actually more of a community discussion. So you would find that when you sit in those tables, you can have, it's about maybe 20 to 30, 40 people max, that can be within that peer talk session. And a lot of people come in there are people who have all these things that they are dealing with at work. And then let's say we are talking about building scalable microservices. And someone is going to come in and say, okay, look, guys, we are currently trying to move a certain number of applications from a legacy environment, and they are built on Go, and we are trying to do this, or we are trying to migrate them to Go from a certain language, and this is what we have, and this. So in that, you have like over these 40 different professionals who have also maybe had to deal with something like that. So you get to hear how people are doing things out there. You get to, give back and learn. I actually signed up for Peer Talk more for my learning than it was for my hosting. I'm not gonna lie. And I have never learned so much. I actually only attended two keynotes uh, sessions at AWS reInvent. All I did was peer talks. Those are the only things I was signed up for. I was co-hosting six myself. I co-hosted six of them, and I also went and attended what others were sharing. And being a co-host just simply meant that I lead the discussion by talking about my own experiences and how I'm building with AWS. And from that, talking about, so we are talking about maybe professionals in the IT era, for example. What's happening? How do you move your career to the next level? How you do this? So you basically are just talking about your own experiences or people within your company that you are leading and how promotion comes. And so there were different talks, from development talks to basic career growth to first time within the industry. So there were the peer talks were spread across different kinds of criteria. And being a co-host was the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced, because in that I met so many people. I mean, the number of connections I made at reInvent, I have never made so many connections the whole time I've been on LinkedIn, for probably 2 3 years before I went to to reInvent. Those were the highest number of connections I've ever made. And these are not just connections of somebody just saying, follow me, let me connect. These are people that you actually sit down and you spoke to. And they are, some of them are industry leaders, and you can tap from them yourself, and you're like, oh, you are the head of cloud at such a bank. So you recently worked on this. Can you tell us about that? And you get to hear one-on-one from the people that are running some of these things that you probably have read about in case studies, and they are sitting across from you and they are talking to you about how they are building, how they set up their teams, how they set up their environments. And it was just amazing. I think for the largest amount of time, That is all I just wanted to do. I woke up every morning from my hotel and I wanted to be at a peer talk. I just wanted to hear what everybody's doing, what everybody's building, because it was a bit personalized, you know. It was different from sitting in a hall and just watching slides. It was more of somebody's across from you on a nice round table and there's like 40 of you. And there are people from all walks of life, all walks of different industries, healthcare, finance, education, government. And they're all there to talk about microservices. They're all there to talk about serverless. They are all there to tell you their experiences about what they are building with AWS. And you get to hear firsthand from these experts their basic day to day. It was a beautiful learning experience. And the connections that in person encounter, there's nothing that beats that.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I've been to so this past year was the second time I went to reInvent. And when I go to tech conferences, I normally don't sit in on any of the sessions. I hang out in what's called the hallway track, right? It's where you just sort of hang out and network and like see who's mingling around, and that's where I have the most productive conversations. And at the last reInvent, I only went to a couple of specific sessions and mostly just went around and talked to people. I didn't check out any of the peer talk things, although after hearing you talk about them now, I definitely need to get in on it next year for sure, because it you talk about it with such enthusiasm, and it just sounds like a wonderful thing. And again, goes back to this sense of community that the AWS group has kind of been able to put together, right? That I'm not sure what the other communities out there are like, but I know that the serverless group in particular are very welcoming, and we do our best to just teach and not have any assumptions like, oh, you have to have this degree, or oh, you need to know these things before you're in, which I really, really appreciate. And to that, when you first started learning all this cloud stuff, and like, how did you decide to focus on like serverless and not, I don't know, Kubernetes or like the networking or, virtual workspaces? AWS will rent you a satellite if you want. Like, there's all kinds of stuff you can buy. How did you really just land on serverless?
I would say Russians.
Okay, okay, okay.
To begin with, I had fallen in love with serverless development firstly when I attended Andrew Brown's. He had a free boot camp around about 2 years ago, the AWS Cloud Project Bootcamp. So I attended that and I enjoyed the serverless part more than any other thing. And I was like, this is great. And I would say this is a sidebar to say if you are coming into tech and you're trying to figure out where you are, what you want, I would recommend go and do a full project, like a full stack project, a full stack cloud project. Kind of like how Andrew Brown has that cloud project bootcamp. Do a project that you need to do the back end from scratch. You need to see what's happening in the front end. You need to do infrastructure as code. You're gonna do databases. You're gonna do networking, like the whole shebang. And by the time that you get to the end of that, like you start building properly, you're putting things on RDS, and then you get to containerize them, and then you move them to serverless, and then CloudFormation or AWS SAM and pipelines, like the whole thing start to end. When you do that, I have found that that's when you find what you like, what you enjoy. I didn't really enjoy the networking part, but I had to do it
Same, same.
because I needed to connect, but I was like, I don't think I want to be a network architect. And there are those in the bootcamp that went the extra mile to design the network differently from what Andrew was making us do. And there are those who went the extra mile with the security because they enjoyed security. There are those who went the extra mile with serverless. You understand? Some went the extra mile with DevOps instead of just the normal code pipelines. They went and did Jenkins. They went and did all of that. They containerize things differently from what we're doing the normal way. And I would say a full project like that makes you discover, if you, in case you're not sure, what exactly you love. Others were enjoying front end more. Their front end was not just the basic that Andrew was making us do as long as it works. They went and did the whole thing. And you could tell, oh, this person really loves front end. So if you are trying to get into the cloud and you're trying to figure out, okay, the cloud is so broad, there's all of these things that I can do. Where do I fit in? And you are right there at the beginning, find a full project, a full cloud project that you can work with top to bottom, ground up all the way to the end. And when you do that, you will find your niche. That's how I fell in love with serverless. So already when I finished that, I was excited about it. And then Veliswa, she's a developer advocate for AWS here in Southern Africa. She now introduced me to Rocious because she would see I love serverless. And oh, Ro just made me fall even deeper in love with it. And I've loved it ever since. I don't think there's anything else I want to do at this moment, at least.
That's so cool because, yeah, I mean, it's almost like if people go to college, well, over here in America, like if people go to college and they say, like, I tell them use college as a way to try a bunch of different subjects and see which ones you actually want to study. It's not just about picking the thing that you think is going to make you the most money or the thing that's gonna be the easiest. You want to be able to pick something that you're gonna be interested in. And the only way to do that is to try a bunch of different things. Because no one can really tell you what you're going to be interested in. Um, and I want to give a good shout out to Andrew Brown because I followed a lot of his stuff on Free Code Camp. The latest one that he has on the Solutions Architect Pro is really good. It's
Yeah.
like 80 hours, and I just speed run it at like 2 times X, you know? But it is very good. And then after that, have you heard of Forrest Brazil's Cloud Resume Challenge?
Oh, yeah, I did that. That was one of the first projects I did when I got into the cloud.
Oh, perfect.
It was my first
I
project.
have to give so many props to Forrest for coming up with that because it is everything you need. Like if you really want to try to get into the cloud business, as it were, and you do Andrew Brown's course or Forrest's Cloud Resume Challenge, you'll really get a sense of what it's like to use AWS or Azure or whatever.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Very, very cool. So it sounds like, you've had a really big like whirlwind of change within the last couple of years for you in your career and where you think you would have been. And it's really beautiful to have you on the show. We've been talking now for almost an hour, and I want to take the last few minutes to ask the real serious questions. The ones that are really about why we're here on this planet. So,
I think.
Rejoice,
Yeah.
with all of your like worldly experiences and your brilliant sort of joy in life, right? If you could repaint the sky a different color, like the sky itself is not going to do anything like we imagine now on Earth. What color would it be, and how do you think that would change life on a planet if the sky was a different color? And you get to pick the color.
I'll paint it yellow.
You just pick yellow. The sky was just bright yellow all the time.
Yellow. Reason is I think yellow is a happy color, and yellow is a color of it's a color of hope. It's a color of energy, vitality. I mean, people give. If you want to give a friend a flower, you're gonna give them yellow roses. They mean friendship and things like that. So I think yellow for me shows intellect. It talks about hope. it says, you know what, things are gonna be okay. And yeah, it's be happy, be joyful. Yellow is a happy color, and it's not my favorite color or anything, but it's one of those colors when I wake up in the morning and the sun is out and it's just bright yellow into my room, and I'm like, oh, it's gonna be a good day. It always does that to me. Now I just imagine the whole sky yellow. That would just be great. You wake up and you have joy.
It is extra bright, it's extra energy. Yellow is energizing in itself. Um, that is wonderful. The idea of Rejoice painting the sky yellow with her happiness and joy and, newfound love of cloud. Like this.
My name is Rejoice, after all.
Yeah, yeah.
I do things from a place of joy.
That is pretty cool. That is wonderful. Nice. Well, Joyce, what else are you working on right now that you want to tell our listeners about? Like, where can they go and find you and get more information about you, connect with you?
Well, they can find me on my LinkedIn. I also have a Medium. I'm sure we'll put it on the screen. I have a Medium account as well where I blog, as well as a dev.to account where I also blog. What I'm currently working on, I'm working with, so check out EduCloud Academy. We are working on a whole different bunch of workshops, from things like using generative AI to take a picture of your grocery list and just let it create a payment link for you straight up. Like, we are just creating some incredible things there. We recently finished another one where it's called TuneFlow, where it's like a music app. Like I said, our workshops at EduCloud are not workshops of just, oh, build a static website. They are actually workshops of things that people have come up and said, oh, I've actually been meaning to have a platform like this. And they take that workshop and they turn it into something production level, enhancements, of course, based on their use cases. But we're working on some pretty cool workshops. We are also upgrading the current workshops that we have, to see where we can put generative AI. We are always updating based on new features, like if we have workshops with AppSync and simple WebSockets and APIs. Now there's AppSync events. So we are always going back to make sure that our workshops are always up to date with the latest technologies as announced by AWS and whatever other service providers that we use. So yeah, check that out. Make sure you go check out EduCloud Academy. Check out our very super cool generative AI workshops. They are amazing. They're out of this world. So yeah, that's something I can give a shout out to. We're very proud of that, and I would like to see more people actually, get to work on something like that and complete it and say, oh wow, I just built this. It's been great. It's been great.
Nice. Definitely check out it's EduCloud Academy, right?
Yes.
You will be talking about Rejoice's workshops and tutorials the same way we talk about Andrew Brown's workshop and tutorials. You are inspiring a whole brand new generation of cloud engineers and cloud developers. And with that, Rejoice, thank you so much for joining me today, sharing your story, being so lively and happy and enthusiastic about the world that we're in and the work that we're doing. And it doesn't all have to be doom and gloom and curmudgeonly, nitpicking about programming languages and syntax, right? Like, it doesn't have to be that way. And with that, listeners, audience, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Paul Chin Jr. I've been the host of Talking Serverless, where we talk about serverless, presented by Serverless Guru, your partner in the cloud. If you love this episode, be sure to leave a like, comment, share, subscribe, do all the things. Probably even have an RSS feed somewhere if you're old school like that. If you hated the podcast, also leave a comment. Any engagement helps with the algorithms. And with that, fine listeners, May your DNS resolve and all your caches bust. Until next time, have a great day.